The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to a baseball season preview edition of the Phixated Podcast. I am your host, Mike Azzolina, and I am joined by maybe the only man in the world who is as excited for opening day as I am. Regsy Boo, we are just hours away from the first pitch of the 2023 Philadelphia Phillies season. How you feeling, big man?
I feel like singing that Christmas song. It's the most wonderful time. I feel like I could just be singing that in my head all day long. This is the best time of the year when we get into baseball. We don't hide it very well, how big of fans of baseball we are. So this is like, again, I know the Eagles went to the Super Bowl and that was cool and all that, but like, opening day, the baseball season starting, baseball on TV every night. Something to watch, something to talk about, something to do. It's the best. It's just the best.
Yeah, there's an old quote from Hall of Famer Rogers Hornsby.
Sure.
And it's, people ask me what I do in the winter when there's no baseball. I'll tell you what I do. I stare out the window and wait for spring.
That's right.
And I don't know that there's a better quote to describe like my stance on not baseball season.
Yeah.
I follow the Eagles. I love watching the Eagles. I love football. But there's nothing, and I repeat this, there's nothing like opening day of baseball.
Nope. It's just the best.
There's just no feeling like knowing that come Thursday, we pretty much have baseball every day, hopefully through November again.
Right, exactly.
But this beautiful sport, this beautiful, amazing, relevant sport. Like someone asked me last week, what's the best smell in the world? And I said the best smell in the world is walking into Citizens Bank Park and smelling the mixture of freshly cut grass with ballpark food.
Yep.
With the air of baseball floating over top of it.
Yep.
There's no better vibe than that, Regs.
Yeah. We walk in at Bull's Barbecue. So that's what
same.
That's what I smell.
Same. We do the same.
Yep.
And there's just no vibe like that. But we're so excited for this season for so many reasons. We had an incredible year last year. Just the journey of the baseball season was above and beyond anything we could have hoped to experience.
Yeah.
And here we are on the precipice of a brand new baseball season. And there's expectation, there's excitement, there's
a little uncertainty. Yep.
In the mix.
A proper amount of angst.
A certain amount of angst that you and I have expressed with a lot of vulgarity in our text message chain.
That's right.
At the end of the day, it's still baseball season.
That's right.
And this is a really talented roster, even with the guys they're missing. So as we prepared for the baseball season, you may have seen our tweet last week. You may have seen our call for this last week. But we asked for a very special guest to come on and preview the season with us. And our wish was granted.
Yeah. Again. These things
Again.
I don't know how it keeps happening, but it keeps happening.
New friend of the pod, Philadelphia Inquirer Phillies beat writer Alex Coffey answered the call, Regs.
That's right.
And we are an Alex Coffey podcast.
From day one.
Day one. We are day one Alex Coffey followers. But in all seriousness, what an incredible conversation we had a chance to have with her. You guys will hear it in just a little bit. She was so gracious, so fun to talk to from start to finish, and truly gave us a glimpse into the Phillies clubhouse like we don't really have. I think
Yeah.
we assume things, Regs. Like
Mhm.
we assume we know what's going on.
Sure.
But her perspective, even from like what she talked about at the beginning, and we won't go too far into it, but with like the Girardi stuff,
Yeah.
all the way
Yeah.
to the postseason clubhouse experience, to spring training this year, and what the roller coaster has been like for this team, and how they're going to come out on the other side. I think all of our conversation with her was so in tune to the things that we just don't really understand.
Yeah. And really couldn't. Like, this is the
Yeah.
stuff. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record because we talked about it a lot on the Ruben episode, but the timing of this continues to be amazing with the guests we're getting. Like, to have Ruben give the insight on winter meetings and how those things really work. And now we get Alex on to, as a person who literally has been in the locker rooms.
Yeah.
In the, like, at spring training, in Clearwater, when all this stuff happens, can see can literally be this far away from the people that it's affecting and talks to them on and off the record and has unbelievable amounts of insight in her brain that you would, again, she obviously writes about it, her colleagues write about it, but when you're able to talk to someone, a lot of that stuff just kind of comes out. So it was just, again, the insight that we continue to get people to come on and talk about on this show will just continue to baffle and humble me every single time. But it was just, it was great.
Yeah, so I think, that being said, let's do it, right? Let's just get her, let's get this thing going. Let's let you guys listen to it. And I'm going to say decide for yourself, but let me just tell you, going into it, I'm going to predetermine it for you. It's pretty freaking awesome. So without further ado, here is Philadelphia Inquirer Phillies beat writer Alex Coffey. All right, everybody, we are joined by the one and only Alex Coffey, beat writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer for our very own Philadelphia Phillies, and the inventor of the Philly daycare. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. I don't think I invented it. I think I just drew attention to it. So I want to give credit where it's due. I think it was Bryce Harper or Kevin Long, either one of those guys who came up. So they should copyright that.
We'll call you the illuminator of the Phillies. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Awesome. Well, again, we appreciate you coming on so much to hang out with us.
Sure.
And we're going to jump right into our questions. We don't want to steal too much of your time, but the first one that weighs on the minds of many Phixated listeners. We started this podcast last year, right? Phillies have this magical playoff run. You started as a Phillies beat writer last year. They have this magical playoff run. So I guess, Alex, the question is, who's more responsible for the playoff run? Is it the Phixated podcast or is it Alex Coffey? Which one is really more responsible?
It's a good question. I don't know. I feel like if I take responsibility for things, I'd also have to take the blame when things go badly. So
that's very fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I think it was.
Then give it to us.
Yeah.
We're ready to share it with you, honestly. So
yeah. But I mean, just coming into something like that a year before it happens, what was it like to sort of come into Philadelphia, see that baseball team that hasn't gone on a run like this in any run at all in 11 years? And not only that, but to see the city sort of rally to the baseball team. I don't know if you've had any experience like that or what it was sort of witnessing that in sort of Philadelphia's way of handling that situation.
No, definitely not. And definitely not seeing it day in and day out. Obviously, like, if you're watching it as a fan, it's completely different than being in the clubhouse every day and seeing the energy shift when the manager is fired and the new manager comes in and seeing the impact that things like that have. And so it was remarkable to just see the transition from spring training coming after a lockout, like everything was kind of rushed. And then they sign all these guys down to, the end of the year when they're in the World Series and playing baseball in November. So it was kind of surreal. I've never worked in a market like this before. I freelanced a little bit in New York before I came here, but I wasn't covering a beat. I wasn't covering a team. And before that, I covered the Oakland A's, which was obviously like a completely different experience. Even though they made the playoffs, when I was there, the owner operates, he's the antithesis of Middleton. Like it's completely different. Like he's not around at all, doesn't spend any money. Middleton spends a ton of money and is always around. He's like shagging balls in the outfield. So like it's very different.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was unlike anything I've experienced, but also it was an amazing, it was an amazing thing to see just from like a personal, day in, day out level. Like I said, like seeing the impact of Rob and seeing the impact of like Schwarber come into his own as a clubhouse leader and see how all that kind of came together and led to a playoff run was really cool. But I think it's different because I didn't have like the context of, a lot of the other beat writers who cover the team were there for like all the down.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that context. But I will say it was jarring, like seeing the first 2 months of the season versus like the rest of the season. Things look really, really, like I caught on quick how, the grievances that fans had, like the late inning disaster, the Juris Familia, like blowing things. And yeah, it did not take me long to catch on to that.
Yeah.
So I got a taste of it, but definitely not to the extent that everyone else on the beat did.
Sure.
So.
No, that's great.
Alex, if you go back and listen to any of our episodes from earlier in the last season, I think I complained about Juris Familia pretty much every single show. I mean, and the overuse and just the role. So I appreciate all of that context for your experience last year, and we certainly enjoyed following along with your postseason coverage. It was fun to watch you in the locker room and your videos and all that. It was just a blast.
Yeah.
But as we know, like all good things come to an end and we have to start over again, right? So as much fun as we had following that, and I'm sure that you had being a part of it, it's time to kind of turn the page and think about this year, and the expectations, at least in the city, as they always are after a winning season, are pretty high.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to start with camp, and feel free to kind of, talk about a couple of guys if you feel the need, but a player that you watched or interacted with that maybe we wouldn't really necessarily think about in this moment, or fans wouldn't think about throughout your time at camp, that you feel like had the vibe that this season's going to be a really good one for them. They're going to step up. We're going to see them, play a crucial role on this roster. Who comes to mind when I describe that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Trey Turner has been, he's just picked up right where he left off from the WBC and has just carried that into spring training.
Does he glow when he walks in the room? Like, is there something?
No, he's just like very quick. He's like in and out, like always
okay.
like moving, you know what I mean? Like it's very like what you'd expect from someone that's quick on the base paths. Like I feel like he's just always in like turbo mode. So he's definitely one that sticks out. I'm trying to think who else. Junior Marte, definitely. He's been like nasty this spring, and he was someone that they acquired in the trade that sent Eric Miller to the Giants, and it kind of, was one of those little like Bellotti-esque transactions. Yeah. Like didn't seem like a big deal at the time, and I feel like it could end up, obviously he's on the opening day roster, so they see something in him, and I feel like he could play a big role as someone too that could give them like multiple innings in the bullpen, which would be really big. So he's definitely someone. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to like, I don't have the roster in front of me, so I'd have to kind of like go through like name by name, but yeah, those two probably stick out in my mind right now.
I think that's great. And we've talked about Junior Marte, and I'm glad you mentioned him. His stuff just jumps off the screen when you're watching him. Mm-hmm. So when you mention him, that's the type of guy that I think a lot of people just don't know about. Yeah, of course, like we love Trey and we're so excited to have him. But we've talked about Junior as a possible difference maker on this roster, and someone that not a lot of people know about. And that's exactly what we were hoping for when we scripted the question. Like we wanted to hear about someone that maybe jumped out to you as standing and watching him. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And Jose Alvarado's throwing a curveball now, which, good luck.
I was about to say,
So,
I'm not sure how you hit the other stuff. Just
yeah. He's
dropping
like,
something
I'll
at
follow up
85.
100 with 86.
Right.
I'm like, that sounds unpleasant.
Yeah.
For anyone facing that.
Yeah, we don't envy that. But switching to someone who is getting talked about a lot, but someone that you have sort of been reporting about since the beginning of camp is Nick Castellanos. You talked about the changes that he's trying to work on with Kevin Long, all those kinds of things. Because you are at spring training and you're talking to these guys all the time and you're in the locker room, do you get any sort of sense that it doesn't seem like Nick's confidence in himself publicly would ever wane, but that could be a lot different to what he's feeling or talking to his fellow teammates about? We've seen the walks tick up. Mike sent me a stat the other day that he's walked 10 times this spring and he's only walked 12 times in all spring trainings combined up to now. So that's a pretty crazy number. So from what you've seen and reported on and in your reporting, have you really seen I know there's a conscious effort to change it, but do you really think he's finding something sustainable? And do you see in Nick like that confidence back? It seems like that's a huge part of him is like just going up to the plate and being like, I'm that guy who can pull this off all the time.
Yeah, I definitely think his plate discipline is better. I think he's not swinging at pitches that he would have swung at like last year. So that's something that I've definitely noticed. But it's more like cutting down on the movements, like getting a little bit closer to the plate. It's like little tweaks here and there. But I honestly think that a lot of this has to boil down to like feeling settled and feeling like he has time to be here and not feel rushed. Like last year he signed right after the lockout and had to find a place in Philly. And, he and his wife had their second son like halfway through the season. And there was like a little bit of, I don't know if guilt is the right word, but, he wanted to spend time with him and he wasn't able to. And so I think last year was just like the accumulation of a lot of things that might have impacted what we saw from him, like just being pulled in a lot of different directions. So right now I just see someone that just seems settled, I don't know if it's like definitely like more comfortable and more confident, but also just like, he just seems like more at peace than before.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like Nick would need it doesn't ever seem like those kind of guys would lose their confidence. So it's interesting, to sort of hear that when a professional athlete says he's unsettled or he sort of feels like he's being pulled in a bunch of directions, you kind of think that comes with the territory. But it was really interesting to hear him sort of admit's a strong word, but admit publicly that he was feeling that way. And that might have led to his sort of on-field performance.
Yeah. And I think it's really healthy too, because it's something that no one really knows about unless they're willing to share it. And it's just a reminder that regardless of how much money these guys make, they're still people who have families and lives and like have to deal with the stuff that we have to deal with, like moving and having a kid and taking care of the kid. And like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's different, but it's also the same.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
So,
And I appreciated all of his vulnerability with you in through your reporting. Like I felt like you said, it's brave of him to do. Like he could hide behind that, and I appreciated his vulnerability in with the fan base about I'm human, right? Like I feel the same things you feel, and I struggle with the same things you struggle with. I think we all show up to work sometimes carrying stuff, and if you don't get a chance to really let that stuff go, it affects you, it impacts you, and certainly Nick's not any different than any of us in that way. So I do know we're leaning on him quite a bit this year with the recent injury to one of our very favorites on the show. We are Rhys Hoskins guys here. We talked about it on the last show, how heartbroken we both were when we saw, we had a little glimmer of hope with the walking, but I think we knew you can walk. Like we know that's possible. The injury looked bad. He looked like he was in pain.
Yeah.
But Alex, for us, like this is a dude who's been here from day one. He was here through all of it. I mean, there are only two really that I think about in that regard and hold in that regard. And with Rhys's limitations, even putting those aside, how important he is to this roster in the clubhouse. He can carry for a month on the field. Can you just talk about the vibe of that locker room after all of this has gone down and, his importance to the team? I think we see a little bit of that, but like what you've experienced with Reese and how this is just impacting that team top to bottom right now.
Yeah. I think initially it was a little bit somber, which I think is natural, and it would be weird if it wasn't.
Yeah.
But we haven't talked to him yet, but one thing that's become clear through like reporting and stuff and talking to Derek Hall and like guys that have interacted with Reese over the past few days is that he really is emphasizing, that it's like about the team and it's not about, he doesn't want all this attention on him. He really wants them to just like, he knows that this is their window of contention and he wants them to like take advantage of it, which is why he's saying things like, I'm happy for you and I'm happy that you have this opportunity to play to Derek instead of like being mopey about it.
Yeah, sure.
So it's just like little things like that I think really, really set the tone. And Derek even said, he was like, it kind of felt like he gave me his blessing to just like go and run with this opportunity that I have. Like, it's kind of a complicated feeling when your friend and your mentor like gets injured like that.
Yeah.
Front of all these people, and it's his contract year, and who knows how much money he potentially lost with that injury, and it was just a freak injury and all this stuff. But on the flip side, you get this opportunity that you've been waiting for, and there's kind of this like combination of complex emotions that comes with that. So, just that like one small interaction, like him just saying, I'm happy for you. It like kind of like took this like weight off of his shoulders. And that's like, I feel like that's his impact in a nutshell. He's selfless. He, and he sets that tone like throughout that selflessness. He sets that tone throughout the clubhouse. So, he's someone that obviously he's been like crucified by the fan base for being streaky and for his defense, but he really doesn't bring that energy into, like, he's very consistent in his energy and how he interacts with us and how he interacts with his teammates. So I think that people take note of that, and it has an impact.
That's so good to hear. It just from two guys who love the person.
Yeah.
And I went to battle with a lot of people on Twitter during the postseason, and the bat spike homer. I think I might have been the most obnoxious person on that app. But I want to just going off script. Sorry, Regs. I want to just ask something as a follow up here. You mentioned his importance. Do you see? And you kind of mentioned Kyle Schwarber earlier. If he's the answer to this, that's totally fine. Is there somebody else? Because again, like he's not going to be there all of the time now, right? He's going to have his rehab, he's going to have his PT, all of that stuff will come into play. Is there a player that you've seen to start to fill that void? One, and then the second part to that is, do you get a sense that Derek Hall feels good about this opportunity, he's confident, and that the players are rallying around him a bit?
Yeah. First, I think Schwarber has been the leader of this clubhouse since last year.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think you can have multiple leaders who lead in like different ways. My sense is that like Bryce is a little bit more quiet, like lead by example type guy. Whereas Schwarber is like more vocal, and he's someone that will like speak to the media, and he'll be like accountable after like, not that the rest of them are not accountable, but like if they're going through a 5-game or 6-game losing streak, the one we're going to talk to is Schwarber, and he like makes it clear that like he's open to that. Reese is also like that to an extent. I think he is maybe a little bit less of a vocal leader than Schwarber. But again, it's like a combination of these guys. I don't think there's like, they really need to like replace him. And from what I've heard, I think he's going to be around as much as he can. At least that's what he's told his teammates.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But I do think, and I don't know, whether this is going to happen or not, but I do think that this team has shown that they can rally around like a beloved player getting injured. I mean, we saw it happen last year with Bryce, and I think it's possible that it could happen this year with Reese. Whether or not that like comes to fruition, I don't know, but it could like serve as some kind of like extra motivation. Not that they need any. Obviously, they want to go back to the World Series. So,
Right. Thank you.
This kind of stuff doesn't hurt, though. You always hear it with like as we're in the NCAA basketball tournament, right? You hear of teams that have a guy who went out for a year right before the playoffs started, or all these things that it's sometimes these little things that really motivate the team. Everyone knows the easy ones, right? We need to get back to World Series. We need to win 2 more. It's Topper's first year, all the real full first year, all those things. It's never bad. Again, we feel horrible for him, and it being the last contract year. Like, these guys they're not like stupid to that fact. They understand that is also what's happening, that he's in his contract year with this team. And so great to hear that he'll be around, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's just this really cruel, like I wasn't there for these years, but the fact that like he was on so many bad teams and was the face of these bad teams and had to like, because he's such a polarizing player, he had to like he's like absorbed so much criticism. I think that's part of the reason why that bat spike was such a cathartic moment for him, was because of all that, all of that context. So then, given all that, for him to have this freak injury happen that wasn't even, it's like a non-contact injury, like, it's just really, really sad. And I think that is the kind of thing that people can rally around, especially because he's like I said, quiet leader, selfless leader, and has like absorbed a lot of negativity.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard plenty about it.
Yeah. But like, he doesn't like, at least not to me, like he doesn't like complain about it. Like he's just kind of, the same way. So, which isn't easy.
Yeah. Still the loudest thing I've ever heard was when that home run got hit. I was there in left field. It was the loudest thing I've ever heard to this day.
Yeah.
But,
it was pretty bad.
So kind of jumping over to something else that you reported on, the Aaron Nola situation. Obviously you had those tweets about, from quotes from Dombrowski about things being broken off. And then again, Aaron Nola's agent saying, we just couldn't find it right now, but we're confident that something will happen, at the end of the season. Do you have any kind of sense of sort of what the snag was? I mean, there could be a lot of things, right? Years, money, a combination of those things. We've heard a lot about sort of like the comparison to JT Realmuto and when they had to figure out his extension sort of after, when a lot of the fan base wanted it to happen and all those things. But what are your thoughts on Aaron and his potential return to the Phillies, and if they can maybe find a common ground?
We asked what the snag was and he wouldn't tell us.
Sure. Of course.
What the snag was and he wouldn't tell us. It's not the kind of thing that they want to air out publicly. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I do think it is interesting that he mentioned the Realmuto thing. I mean, you can look at it 2 ways. Like, on one hand, he might be saying that to appease the fan base and just like let them, calm down over the next few months. But on the other hand, it's like, I don't know, you probably don't want to give a fan base like this like false hope and like optimism if you're just like not gonna try to get something done at the end of the season, So I do think it's positive that they're going to revisit things. Like, both parties said that they're going to revisit things after the season is done. And I do think it makes sense. Like, obviously you don't want it to be a distraction during the season. So yeah, I don't really know what the snag was, honestly. But it sounds like it was just kind of, it came to like a point of, like it wasn't like productive anymore.
Sure. I mean, I don't get the sense that Aaron is the kind of guy that would let it affect him on the field, and it certainly doesn't seem that way from what he said publicly. He keeps saying he wants to be a Philly, that he wants to be here. Obviously, him and his agents are going to seek as much value for him as possible. But of course, the team has to think about it also with a couple young guys coming up, and Painter and Abel and even McGarry that they're looking at. So
yeah. I don't think that he's going to be like distracted or phased by it, but like I said, with Castellanos, these guys are human, and it's difficult. I mean, I think about the guys that choose to sit through their arbitration hearings, like hearing, not that this happened with Nola's negotiations, but like hearing your employer tell you that you're not worth that much money.
Yeah, right.
Like, like some guys, I give them credit, like they want to sit through it because they want to be informed and understand how the process works, but it's like, I don't know, they're really mentally strong. I give them credit, but I would not be able to sit through that and then like go back to work the next day.
That's such a great point.
I think Eflin did that. I think it was Eflin that said that he was like there for his hearing, and I was like, I don't know how he did, but I do think it's really interesting that like over the course of like a couple of days, Hoskins goes down, and then we hear this news about Nola, and these are like the two longest tenured guys.
Yeah.
I think they've both been in the organization since like 2014.
Yep.
So I don't know. There's some weird symbolism with that, but like, I don't know. It kind of feels like a jolt, you know, these guys that have been like omnipresent for such a long time, suddenly like their future in the organization is kind of in jeopardy. So I guess we'll see.
Only you could see the text that Mike and I were sending back and forth to each other when those two things happen simultaneously.
Yeah. I guess it's just weird as like a 1-2 punch. I was like, wow, that's a lot to stomach.
Yeah.
I just gotten back to Clearwater, and I was like, oh, just a couple days in Clearwater, and then I go back home, and then I go to Texas, and hopefully it'll be low key. And it was like Reese, you know, like trips over something, like he like missed awkwardly and is out for the year. And then the next day, and then all this stuff happens, and I was like, okay, well,
so much for an easy transition. And you mentioned like these two guys being the longest tenured players on the roster, and and all of this happening at one time, and it's symbolic. And there's like this piece of me that's like, let that symbol be something for the positive, because vibes were so high, Alex. Like we were through the roof throughout the off season, everything that they did. Like we were feeling so good about the players brought over and everything across the board. And then all of this goes down, and it feels like they're being faced with just so many challenges right now. You know, the Bryce one we've kind of gotten over, but now we've got the Aaron Nola contract, and we've got the Reese injury and the Suarez stuff. There's all these the painter thing, all of these things popping up. And then you've got the manager who we all fell in love with last year. So I ask you this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be one of these challenges, but Topper's a really confident guy, but he's about to have to manage his way through some really challenging things. What do you see as his biggest challenge going into this season with the roster, with the injury situation? Is there one that stands out above the rest to you? And how's his demeanor been through all of this?
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, I think that that's one thing that he does really well is he's not an alarmist. Girardi would say the right thing, but his energy was just like a coil that's about to like a spring or what, you know what I mean? Like it was very tightly wound. Yeah. And I think that, you know, obviously the players picked up on that. Whereas with Thompson, he's very even keeled, you know, nothing really rattles him. So I think that definitely works to his advantage. As far as challenges go, I mean, obviously just like navigating these injuries, you know, figuring out how, you know, how the first base situation looks. Like it doesn't sound like Hall is going to be, I don't know, they haven't come out and said this, but my guess would be that Hall is probably not going to face a ton of lefties. So like, how do you navigate that? You move Bohm from third to first. Does that like mess with his, you know, his head a little bit because he feels really confident at third right now and has been making strides there? Like, I don't know if it does, but you know, these are like the puzzle is not a perfect there's no like perfect solution here. So it might involve some creativity on his part, but yeah, I think that's probably going to be the biggest one is like figuring how all that pieces together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, with our last couple minutes here, Alex, we obviously are making this interview a part of our season preview podcast. So we can't let you go without asking you if you can make a prediction But along with that, we wanted to ask if you think anything as cool as the daycare might come up this season, because obviously you started out with a bang, making that public and everything else. So you think anything that cool will come up that you can, give the Philly fan base again, and then how do you think the team's really going to do?
Well, when I wrote a story about Abel, McGarry, and Painter all living together in spring training.
That's a great story.
I think some people were like daycare 2.0, like new version of daycare. So I don't know. There might be like a next generation of.
There you go.
I don't know. Maybe if they all end up contributing at some point, we'll see. That seems like a long shot, but yeah. So that could be something. Obviously, I'm going to be on the hunt for a new playlist.
There you go.
Yes.
That's a great one.
Trying to think. Like, I guess from a vibe standpoint, obviously they're dealing with a lot of injuries, but I will say the guys that they brought in either via trade or by signing are good, like energy guys. And I sound like, I don't know, like a snake oil salesman or like Matt Strom, for example, is like really good. Yeah. I don't know, just like fits really well, like already with Marsh, like just really easy fit from like a cultural standpoint.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of guys like that, so I think that like the people that they've added, and even if you look at like Derek Hall, he's beloved by this clubhouse. So obviously it's bittersweet because Reese is injured, but him being around everyone more, I think will help the energy too. So I don't think it's all like doom and gloom necessarily, but I also understand how this market works.
Well, you've only got, no, you did get to see the struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
I
got just enough. I got enough for
me. Right.
Yeah.
To be like, please always win like you are right now.
Yeah.
Don't ever lose again. While I'm here, I need you to win constantly.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see. It actually reminds me a little bit of like the Eagles, a little bit like their different playoff runs. Just because, when they won the Super Bowl, they were underdogs and they really thrived in that role. And I think the Phillies, similarly last season, underdogs playing with house money, went to the World Series. I'm really curious to see how they perform under like expectations, now that they've set this bar for themselves, like, are they going to live up to it?
Yeah. So let's end on this then, because you mentioned that and it struck me a little bit. I've seen a lot of articles this week, a lot of predictions about an 81 win team. And I just don't see that, Alex. And I'm just curious, is this team good enough to do what they did last year? Like, can they get back there? Can they win those last two games based off of what you've seen on paper and in the clubhouse?
I think on paper, they're a much better team. So in theory, they should be able to, but the best team doesn't always win.
Right.
And that's, like so many things have to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen that with the Mets, like Edwin Diaz is already,
right.
Like these things are so fickle. They're so delicate. So, so yeah, they're just a lot of stuff has to go right. And obviously a lot of it depends on like how the other teams are doing in the division.
Yeah.
And they're in a tough division. So we'll see. But on paper, they're definitely a better team. And I would take the over on 81. That seems kind of low to me. But I'm also not good at these, like,
That's okay.
Like a no-win situation for me to like predict.
Just taking the over is fine. That's good enough for us.
That's fine. Well, yeah. And it's not even the Vegas over, so you're good. You're totally fine. Oh, Alex, we so appreciate you coming on to hang out with us for the time that you were able to give us. And as I do with every guest that we have on, I'm gonna have Reg send you the website with our merchandise. We'll send you something. You pick it out. Tell us what you want. We so appreciate you coming on and hanging with us and spending some time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. This is fun.
Yeah, we've been huge fans since like your first tweet. I think I texted Azzy like, you need to follow her now. And you have not disappointed since. So we really
now I need to know what tweet it was.
I'll have to go back. I'm sure I have the text message still. So I'll figure
probably
that out.
I was gonna say, just look at your text chain, Regs. Take the next day and a half to scroll.
Yeah, right. To just keep scrolling. It'll take a while, but yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
You are a permanent friend of the Phixated Pod. We hope we can have you back at some point.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
Really appreciate it. Thanks.
So, Regs, what do you want to talk about?
I mean, I finally found a good cheesesteak spot down the road. It's been like 12 years that I've been here in Maryland, and I finally found a decent one. It's not.
Don't you hate?
It's not.
Don't
It's
you?
still not great, but at least it's the best I've found.
Don't
So,
you
I mean,
hate when you go somewhere and they have Philly cheesesteak on the menu and it's not a Philly cheesesteak?
well, all you have to know is if they call it Philly cheesesteak. If Philly's in front of it, you're in the wrong restaurant to try and find a good one.
Should have asked Alex what her favorite Philly cheesesteak was.
I should have. It just would have made me really hungry.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because
We asked her
all terrible down here.
We asked some pretty cool questions, and she gave some pretty incredible answers. Though,
Just amazing.
Yeah.
I think to your point, even in the intro, the Girardi sort of mentions that she just kind of threw in there. It's
Yeah.
not even like we were talking about it, but she just threw in a bunch of stuff. Even when you asked the topper question about his demeanor, like he was like a koi, like he was like a spring ready to pop.
Yeah.
Like that was his attitude.
Yep.
And you're just like, oh my gosh, like what an amazing tidbit just to like throw in casually.
Listen, the vocabulary is one of a writer.
Yeah.
Like
very true.
she just like she was able to just explain things in a way that only a writer can explain things. And I don't say this as someone who like thinks they're a writer. I pretend to be one. She
Well,
is one.
Technically, you're signed to a book deal, so I mean, you are a
Well,
writer, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean,
I am
has
not a writer.
her vocabulary, it was cool.
Yeah.
It was just cool the way she described certain things that like you're like, oh yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
You know, I we're gonna get to our own predictions here in a little bit. We had her, you know, sort of talk about, you know, she admittedly said like I don't really do well with the numbers over
and
under.
I'm sure she doesn't really want to. Like, she doesn't want to be put on the spot there, you know?
No, that's a tough question to answer.
all
And truly not one that I really cared about at the end of the day. Or the rest of the insight that we got was like mind blowing.
Yeah.
So, let me ask you before we do our actual like season predictions, some takeaways that you had from our time with Alex.
I think my thing this entire year is just going to be watching Castellanos. I
Okay.
just am so interested in if he can get his way back. I don't think we're going to see that guy from 2 years ago.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's that might be just his peak as a baseball player, and there's not a ton of guys that live at their peak. But again, we've said this a million times, that talent it doesn't just go away. And she was, again, this was one of her first sort of stories out of spring training was about Castellanos and him being uncomfortable and sort of like him admitting the fact that like these things happened last season that made me just not be in a good headspace.
Mhm.
And you'd think with a guy like Castellanos who sort of bristles or, you know, says that's a stupid question to Salisbury, you know, that guy doesn't seem to really want to share a lot of things. And for him to share that and be really honest about his son being born and having to move to a new place and like that address being leaked almost immediately, like, and all those things making him feel a certain way. And then by Alex's, you know, account, he's sort of past those things. He's reconciled. He's, you know, done what he has to do to get in a better space and feel more comfortable. I am just so interested if it's going to translate into him getting back to that hitter that we saw. But again, it was such a cool question to ask her as literally the person who was on top of this stuff as soon as spring training started.
Yeah, that stuck to me too, and I love that she like highlighted his vulnerability and the fact that he's human.
Yeah.
And he leaves his house every day with the same, you know, emotions and affects that we leave our house with.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. I mentioned one to you before we started recording, but I'm actually gonna lean on two. And I think the first one is the way she spoke about her perspective coming here.
Yeah.
When you asked her the question about the market and like changing, you know, like that experience that she had and the difference from months 1 and 2,
Mm-hmm.
April, May, and then June on.
Yeah.
And how the city, and her explanation of like, I did a little freelance in New York. I worked in Oakland, even when they were a playoff team, and it was nothing like this.
Yeah.
Which goes back to why we started this podcast, Regs. You know, that whole Philadelphia fan base thing and the dedication that this team has. And I love how she compared a little bit to the Eagles and their championship run and that hunger for more. All of that sort of highlights the city and the fan base. And I think she did it perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, she orchestrated that conversation perfectly. To the point, Regs, where I feel like there are some fans that have been here for 30 years that couldn't do it as well as she did after one. And that sort of blew my mind.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, she's a very perceptive person, and which obviously leads to her being very good at her job. She can pick up on these things. Philadelphia, sometimes, you know, we don't make it that hard to know what we're feeling as a fan base. It's not too difficult to pick up on it, but there is, once you sort of get past that boisterous top level, the rest of like Philly fandom is very nuanced. And I think you just have to, and I think she's understanding it like that. This comes from such a place of like, we just want our teams to be good because they just haven't been. Like, sustained excellence is not a Philadelphia thing that's happened a lot. Like, we don't have a Patriots Tom Brady run. We don't have 7 Super Bowls. You know, like, it's just not a thing. The Sixers don't have a bunch of championships. The Phillies don't have a Yankees level amount of World Series. Like, all these things are true. And it was really interesting to hear her sort of speak to, even though she wasn't around, I'm sure she's heard it from her colleagues, you know, again, players on the team, people who have been in the organization for a long time, and just fans in general that I'm sure, you know, comment on her stuff, that this all just comes from a place of like, it's been pretty down sometimes as a fan base, and specifically for this baseball team. And yeah, her description of it, like all coming around and all that, was just like really, really cool.
Agreed 100% in every layer of it. The other part that I want to highlight, and I sort of spoke to this while we had her on the air, which was the Reese stuff.
Yeah. That was, you know, really, really great.
We talked about this on the last show. I am as big of a Reese supporter as you will find out there. Reese, to me, is the face of the struggle, and what living through the struggle and working hard through the struggle can achieve. You know, Reese came up and was immediately Philadelphia's favorite son.
Yeah.
Because he was on that home run tear. And he went through his streaks and he struggled here and there and had his challenges. And so for him to live out that run last year and have the moments he had, the homer against the Braves, the 2 home run game against San Diego, all the stuff that Reese did during the playoff run, I'll forever be thankful for, right?
Yeah.
I think what I love to hear from Alex was everything that we assume about Reese is true and more.
Yeah.
Her description of his selflessness, his almost intentional ignorance to the noise outside of his clubhouse, the clubhouse. You know, he heard it. He knew what was going on.
Course.
He never let it get to him publicly. And that's how you survive in this place. If fans see you let it get to you publicly, they don't like you.
Yeah.
It's why Scott Rowland got booed out of this place. It's why certain guys can't survive this city.
Yeah.
Hate on him all you want. Say he stinks. Say he's streaky. Say these things. Rhys Hoskins is tough.
Yeah.
He's tough. Mentally strong as they come. And again, to highlight the selflessness piece, everything he's saying to Derek Hall right now is about Derek Hall.
Yeah.
It is not, woe is me. I don't get to play in our window. I don't get to play in my contract year. He might be thinking
I was about
that.
to say,
He
which
might
I'm
be saying
sure
it.
he feels, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
he's probably saying it to Jamie. Like,
Right.
I'm sure he's saying it to his wife.
How could you not, right? You're like, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Regs, like I in a sense lived this like 3 months ago. Like, I didn't say certain things to my staff
Mhm.
that I would say here at home to Andrea.
Yeah.
As I was getting ready to transition out. Like, I know that feeling of, man, this stinks. I don't
Mhm.
get to live out what I want to live out. But I'm going to encourage the next person to do that. And I'm going to encourage the people around me to do that.
Mhm.
And I just so appreciate Rhys Hoskins. If the last time we got to see Rhys Hoskins play was the World Series Game 6, then I'm grateful for all of the time we got to spend with Rhys Hoskins. That being said, before we transition out of this conversation, I did see something tonight about Kyle Schwarber in 2016. He had ACL surgery
Okay.
and ended up coming back and playing in the postseason.
Interesting.
Now, he did DH,
Sure.
so I don't know what that's going to look like with
Yeah,
Bryce.
Unfortunately, that's a busy spot for the Phillies.
Yeah. So we'll have to see what happens there. But it's at least an interesting thought that maybe we do get Rhys back.
It is an interesting thought.
So just going to say that.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, we got to do it. It is our preview show. So, Regs, I need a prediction. Wins and where they finish in the division.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this for a while, and I've been trying to stay realistic, not be a huge homer, try not to get mad when I see these MLB power rankings or like all this garbage that these people put out.
Yeah.
I think they're going to win. I'm going to say 98 games.
Okay.
I think they're going to finish second in the division. If I had to guess, I'd probably say the Mets, because I'm just over people riding Atlanta. Like, you and I are going to have to talk about this some other time, but like why everyone seems to think that they're like the next 27 Yankees. I don't know, but like, that's neither here nor there. So I think they'll finish second in the division, only because we have to be realistic. We are missing a half season of Bryce Harper. We now have a question mark at first base, when we had at least the guy that we know could carry the team for a month if everyone around him was struggling. And again, that also comes with maybe moving Bohm to first on some games. And, again, there's just some weird kinks that are going to happen. So I don't think they're going to sort of blow the doors off of this season. That'll come, but maybe just not in this one. So I'm going to put them just under 100. I'm going to have them finishing second in the division.
Yeah, so we're not super far apart here. I've got him at 95 wins.
Okay.
And I do have him finishing second as well, but I have him finishing second to the Braves.
Okay.
And I think it's by a game or two.
Yeah.
I also don't understand the whole Braves thing, but they always find a way.
I know, but
and
again, I think I missed something in who they signed. They signed like Babe Ruth reincarnate, apparently.
I know, but it's basically the same team, not without Dansby Swanson.
Yeah.
So, and that was a good team. They added a good catcher. So, I think the Phillies, even in their situation, can compete with both of the teams at the top of the division. The good news is that they don't have to play the division as much as they would have in the past.
Very true.
So you get 7 games against the AL Central every team. You get 7 games against the NL Central every team. So, you get the 7 games against the bottom feeders in the West.
Right.
It works out this year. It works out.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That being said, quick fixated before we thank Alex one more time and get out of here. And it's just like I did one similar to this last year, and I feel like we just have to do it to start the year when it happens. And it's just a fixated on baseball. I don't think I'll ever be able to express what this sport actually means to me. I posted something on social media earlier in the week. I'm picking up the glove for the 30th year in a row now, and every year I'm like, I'm not doing it, and every year I'm like, oh, here it is, I'll do it again. And it's because this sport has just meant so much to me my entire life. Like, this is a sport that my family has bonded over. I mean, in a week I'm getting a tattoo of baseball laces with the infinity sign. It's a sport that will forever be something that has bonded me to my family. And it's a sport that I grew up listening to on the radio when I was outside playing it simultaneously in my backyard. And it's a sport that's brought me a lot of tears of sadness, but just as many in terms of quality, tears of joy. And our season last year ended in such a way that I should have been more disappointed than I was, because when you get that far, you want to win, but it reminded me of what baseball brings, which is that feeling of eternal hope. Spring is what brings you that feeling normally, but baseball comes with that. And every year when the season starts, there's 162 games to live out that feeling. And sometimes your feeling of eternal hope is done by the end of May. And sometimes you think it's done at the end of August, but then your team goes on a magic run and you win a World Series at the end of it all. And sometimes the magic run starts and it comes to a halt so suddenly that you're too confused to be upset. But come Thursday, 32 fan bases will have that feeling of eternal optimism. And for one day, everybody's on the same playing field. And that's what makes baseball so great. It is a true marathon. It is a sport that requires you to accept failure as the thing you're going to do the most. But at the end of the day, the success is in that failure. So I just want to take a moment and say a pre-thank you to the sport that has carried me through my life. Good times and bad. I can always lean on, hey, there's a Phillies game tonight. In my worst days, I could look and say, you know what, at 7:00, I get to sit down and watch baseball. So starting Thursday, we get to do that 162 times, Regs, and I don't know that there's a better thing in the world. So tonight, I'm fixated on a new baseball season. Cheers to you, my friend. I look forward to sharing 162 more games of frustration and excitable text messages.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's just like you said. It's my favorite thing that happens. It's my favorite season. And yeah, I just can't wait. And when I continue to love to get the question when I tell people I'm a baseball fan, why? It's like, well, do you have like 11 hours for me to explain all the reasons? If not, I can give you the short version. But if you really want to hear why, there's a lot more in there. But it's exactly what you said. It's just the best. And now I am able to share with my boys, and they, after dinner, we get to turn on the Phillies and see what's going on. So, and then we watch the highlights in the morning. So it's just, it's the best. It's the best.
It is. And when people ask me why I like baseball, I usually tell them because it's the sport that has something called a foul pole, that when you hit it off of it, it's a fair ball.
Mine is that it's because
Feel free to use that.
even when they're doing nothing, everything is happening.
It's so true. It's so true. So, all right, everybody. Well, we so appreciate you listening. But above all else, Alex, thank you so much
Seriously.
for your time. We are so grateful for your willingness to spend, a half hour with us today and really dig into the season with us, because if it were just the two of us, it would not have been as cool.
Yeah.
So
no, not even close.
We're really grateful for
yeah.
that.
Thank you so much for the time. As like we've told you, we are huge fans. We can't wait to see, continue to read all your stuff and see all your insights. It's just the best. So it's worth the Inquirer subscription alone to just read her stuff. So
yeah, make sure you follow her on Twitter as well. I know we didn't do a section where she could talk about where you can find her.
At by Alex Coffey.
Yeah, make sure you follow her, because it is truly
literally one of the best baseball follows for a Phillies fan.
Yeah, honestly, might be for any fan, but
she's the best.
That's just me. And speaking of following, if you're already not subscribing to our YouTube page, go ahead and do that. Yeah. Shameless transitional plug there, ladies and gentlemen. And make sure you follow the platform at B&B Podcast on Instagram. You can follow the same thing on Twitter. Follow at the Phixated Pod on Twitter. You can follow me at the Mic Drop 5. I had to think about that for a second.
It's
follow
like the
Regs.
second time you've forgotten yourself.
I know. It's not good. Follow at Big Regs with a Z on Twitter as well. You can follow us on the Phixated fan page on Facebook, and certainly check out the merchandise page in the description below. Once again, Alex, thank you so much for hanging with us tonight. Thank all of you for listening. Be good, be kind, take care of one another, take care of yourselves. But for the first time this season, go Phils.
Go Phils, baby!
Oh my God! Deep to right field, way up there and way out of here! The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.